Gloria's Lighthouse, written by Ashley Bowie, read by Ash Thurman. The dogs never came home. Sarah stared out into the night as she stroked the cat in a subconscious trance. The lights of the mainland glowed like a late sunset. What do you mean? Mrs. Carter sat crocheting in an overstuffed chair, humming to herself a long-forgotten song. Just what she said, Angie huffed. We let the dogs out hours ago. They never came back. I'm sure they're fine. They should be back soon. Great Danes are intelligent animals. They know not to stay out this late. Simon and Garfunkel aren't used to this island. They're probably a little lost, Mrs. Carter urged. Lost or dead? Angie! Well, it's true. You know this place is haunted. You can't deny it. Angela Meredith Carter. It had been like this for almost a week now. Not only was Angie at that unstable age of 15, but the move had made them all high-strung. Mr. Carter, their father, had the brilliant idea of buying this island and its lighthouse through an auction. He then packed up the entire family and moved them into this old, rundown shack. The light didn't even work. Sarah had it easy. She had been homeschooled and was just now starting 6th grade. She didn't have any very good friends. Angie, though, had to leave all her friends back in Montpelier to come to this barren rock. Her father had been late this past week. Angie and her mother had been at each other's throats almost every night. I wish you wouldn't yell at each other like that. Sarah stalked up the rickety stairs to her little room. At the top, she called back down again. And I already know the place is haunted. You don't have to worry. A deafening slam rattled the walls. Angie gave one last angry leer at her mother and followed her little sister. As she passed the portrait over the mantelpiece, she shuddered. It gave her an uneasy feeling. The only reason it was still there was because it was a hidden vault. If they tore it out, it would cost a lot of money they didn't have. It only bothered her anyway. She sat on her bed staring out the window at the ocean below. She could see, through the evening's twilight, the waves crash against the far-off Maine coastline. She thought about the day they moved in. Mom, what's with the painting? The girl's creepy. She's the one this lighthouse was named after, Gloria Sheffield. Her father built the place. Oh, I meant to tell you earlier. You're going to hear this place is haunted. It isn't. Don't let your sister believe it. After dressing into her pajamas, she lay down. It was not long until she fell asleep. She heard it again. It was only a mere whistle. A normal person would have blamed it on a crack in the wall. This wasn't the same, though. She knew it. It was really as if a human were whistling. It scared her. She told her mother the first time she heard it. Her mother was a normal person, sans an overactive imagination, and blamed it on a crack in the wall. Sarah had heard. The third night she came into Angie's room. Angie, what is it? I don't like it. I don't want to sound scared or anything. It's just, what's the word you used? Eerie? Yeah, it's eerie. Angie, why doesn't Mom believe us? Mom's an adult. Adults think everything has a reasonable explanation. They don't believe in weird things. They should. I know. What was that? An interruption in the whistle broke her reverie. It was a thump, a subtle pounding sound. The clock displayed 1:30 in the morning. Her father would already be home and no one would be getting up for another several hours. Thump! Oh, there it was again. Was it outside? Suddenly, a faint glow shimmered in her window. Angie took in a deep breath and walked to her window. The light was coming from around the corner of the house. The lighthouse was over there. Angie slowly crept down the hallway into Sarah's room. You could see the lighthouse from there. Sarah was standing at the window. Come here, Sarah whispered. Angie looked in the direction where Sarah gestured. On the ledge around the lighthouse, someone was standing. Well, they thought someone was standing. No, there wasn't anyone. There couldn't be. There was a lamp. No, a candle, floating at about the height of someone holding it. It was hovering back and forth along the landing as if it were pacing. The flame flickered a little, and its movement stopped. The enchanted candle rose slowly and clumsily into the air. It fell a ways, then was extinguished. Neither girl said a word for a long time. Angie? Sarah broke the silence. What was that? I mean, Did we really just see a candle floating all by itself? Angie stuttered a little on an answer. I'm sure there's an explanation for this. Maybe it was a suicidal firefly. She gave a nervous laugh. Go back to bed. We'll talk about it in the morning. Angie, still rattled herself, walked back to her bedroom. It was difficult for her to get back to sleep after such an episode. Finally, the morning came. Angie rushed down the stairs. She took a bridge to the mainland. She would have to hurry, though. At high tide, it was an uncomfortably damp walk. The day was like any other day. She sat alone at lunch, in class, and walked home by herself. She walked across the bridge in a somber mood. As she climbed the stone steps up to her house, she glanced at the lighthouse. She was thinking about the night before's events. Just to satisfy herself, she walked to a spot right below where the candle had seemed to float. Nothing there. Nothing at all. Wait, what's this? She stooped down to take a closer look in the tall brown grass. There was a white candle lying on the ground. The wick had been halfway burned. Little bits of dried wax were splattered here and there close by. Angie closed her eyes, not wanting to believe them, and slowly backed away toward the house. Upon jerking around, she met the gaze of the portrait in the living room. Gloria was young but menacing. Is she laughing at me? Don't be silly. She jogged through the back door and into the kitchen. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework and eating an apple. Angie, I can't find the cat. Have you... What's wrong? She inquired. Nothing. Angie wasn't about to tell her sister about the candle. It would scare her. Sarah would tell their mother. Her mother didn't like her telling stories to her little sister. Angie backed up the staircase, taking furtive glances back out into the yard. Her last sight was the portrait of Gloria, staring at her. Before her door could shut all the way, Angie was at her computer logging onto the internet. She would get to the bottom of all this. Her mother had kept telling her not to tell her sister everything she thought she saw or heard. Angie knew she wasn't imagining things. The walls did rattle at night, and she could hear scratches under her bed. It took her hours. She looked up different kinds of hauntings especially. It was hard, though. Everything was strangely worded and hard to understand. Then she found what she was looking for. Have you had strange goings-on at your home? Do you want to know who may be haunting you? She read. Select every supernatural happening you've been experiencing. Okay, I can do that. As she clicked on her last event, the lights went out. Night had fallen by now, and the whole room was pitch black. Everything suddenly came back on. The computer, after having gone off, immediately flashed her current website. Mr. Carter came into the room. Angie, are you okay? When the lights went out, I thought I heard a thump up here. What are you doing? He gazed over her shoulder at the computer screen. What kind of ghost do you have in your attic? Angie, what have your mother and I told you about scaring your sister? This house is not haunted, and we don't want you to dilute your sister with the idea. If I see a website anything like that again, I'll ban you from your computer until you're 30. Come down for supper. He left, his anger flaring. Angie sighed. It was a restless night. The whistling couldn't be heard, and that almost scared her more. Well, at least I don't have school tomorrow. Last night almost killed me in the way of schoolwork. Somehow I get the feeling I won't be doing well in school for a while. Thump! What was that? It was loud, a great pounding thump on the wall that connected her and her sister's room. With one leap, Angie swung around the doorframe into Sarah's room. Sarah was sleeping like a baby. Everything was fine. Angie, relieved, went back to bed. She slept better the last half of the night. The next morning, Angie awoke to red flashing lights. On the climb down the stairs, she saw her mother crying her eyes out and talking to a police officer. She knew something horrible had happened. Mom, what's wrong? Angie took a quick look around the room. She saw a police officer talking to her dad as well, but there was no Sarah. Angie, honey. Mrs. Carter walked toward Angie with outstretched arms. Sarah has gone, well, missing. She wasn't in her bed this morning. We've called all her friends and the police are checking the island. Angie wouldn't have it. She shook her head and started back up the stairs. As she turned, she glanced at the painting. Gloria was staring at her. The regularly normal grin seemed malevolent and sinister. Angie flung herself on her bed when she reached her room. She cried into her pillow for what seemed like forever. No one ever came up to console her. When she finally looked up, the police had already left and the island was quiet yet again. There's no doubt about it. This island really is haunted. First the dogs and cat disappeared, now Sarah. Something else must have happened here, but what? If no one would tell her, Angie was going to find out for herself. The computer was on yet again and Angie got started. Search engine after search engine offered no help. Gloria's Lighthouse just wasn't famous enough. Then a thought came. She searched for and found a list of every supposedly haunted location in the United States. She found it. Gloria's Lighthouse lies in a small island in the Gulf of Maine. It is named after Gloria Sheffield, the daughter of the builder and first owner of the lighthouse, then known as Crimson Guide because of its bright red shingles. Angie recalled the peeling red paint in the lighthouse's roof. Gloria is said to have committed suicide in the mid-1800s before she'd even reached adulthood. She jumped off the lighthouse's ledge in remorse for her sister and parents who were killed in a fatal accident. The island and lighthouse have gone through many owners in the past century. All have had unusual and sometimes fatal experiences at the lighthouse. Sisters have seemed to get the worst. The most unusual of all happened to the James family. Rumor has it that both parents and one of the two sisters living there were found dead. The other sister is said to be living a relatively peaceful existence as far inland as she could get. Whether any of this is the least bit true is unknown. In this writer's opinion, it all seems too far-fetched. It makes sense. Well, sort of. But that James family story isn't the same as what's happening here. It never says the other sister disappears. She dies. Sarah isn't dead. If that doesn't match, then the part about the parents being dead might not match. Oh, this internet site might not be right, though. I need to find out. Angie got up and went downstairs. Mom, she called to her mother, sitting in the living room, attempting to crochet. Who owned this house before we did? Angie sat down in a chair next to her mother. Some man named something James. He owned it, but he's dead now. He left the place to his daughter Katrina. She put it up for auction, then your father bought it. Why? I was thinking if we could contact the owner of the island, we could see if they know about any other caves or nooks on it. You know, if Sarah's still on the island and hiding. Angie, the police checked every corner of this place. She couldn't be hiding. Could you maybe call her? Daddy must have her number somewhere. If it means that much to you, I'll call her. Thank you, Mom. Angie went back up to her room and began looking up as much as she could about hauntings. Being able to find out what was going on was worth being banned from her computer. Her mother came a little while later. I called her, hon. She says there aren't any more than the ones we know about. Come on down for lunch. Your father's out at the lighthouse trying to get it to work. I'll have to bring him his lunch. What are you doing? Oh, nothing. Just some research for English. We're going to start a unit on ghost stories. I'll be down in a minute. Angie went to her window. She saw her mother leave the house with a tray of food. Angie ran down the stairs, almost tripping over her own 2 feet. On the phone table, she found her father's address book, open to James Katrina. Angie wrote down the address and pressed redial on the phone. It rang for an eternity until a human voice could be heard. Hello? Said the voice. May I please speak to Katrina James? Angie politely asked. This is she. Hello? I'm Angie Carter. My mother called a few minutes ago. I was hoping I could talk to you about your sister and parents. You see, my sister is missing. I want to see if there's a connection between your story and mine. There was a long silence. Come to my house tomorrow at noon. The next day came bright and early. Angie left as soon as possible. She left a note for her mother saying she was at the library. Katrina's house was in downtown Portland. It would take her a while to get there by bike. Her mother would be madder than anything at her, but she would deal with it later. Angie arrived at Katrina's house at 5 minutes until noon. Come in. Katrina looked nervous, almost shaky. It also seemed to Angie's wild fancy like she had been insane. Angie could tell this wouldn't be easy for her. They sat on the couch and both were silent. Katrina teared up slightly. So you want to know about my family? Angie nodded. All right. I was young. I don't know how young. Weird stuff had been happening. Floating things and whistles. I didn't know what they were. I had gone somewhere. I don't know where. I came home. Diana, she was my sister, wasn't there. My parents were dead. I screamed. I screamed a lot that day. It was the lady in the painting's fault, it was. She tried to tell me it was mine. It was. She made me do it, but it was my fault. At that point, Katrina broke down. She curled up and started wailing. It was my fault. It was my fault. Angie was, needless to say, uncomfortable. She backed out the door and hopped on her bike. She wanted to distance herself from the grown woman she had left sobbing on the sofa. Angie stopped, breathless, at the corner. She had to get everything straight in her mind. Okay, she thought aloud. Katrina said weird stuff was happening. It's happening. She said her sister wasn't there. Her sister was missing too. She said the lady in the painting did it. She must mean that painting of Gloria Sheffield. She found her parents dead when she came home from somewhere, so... The thought came to her like a lightning bolt from the blue. She had to get home. What happened to Katrina would not happen to her. She rode as fast as her legs would let her. At the end of the bridge, she ditched her bike and ran up the steps. At the door, she hesitated. She didn't want to know, but she had to. She opened the door slowly. It was just as she had feared. Her mother was dead on the kitchen floor, a look of sheer terror on her face. Angie glanced something out of the corner of her eye. It was a movement out by the lighthouse. Her feet took her out the door and up the steps of the lighthouse with little thought. There she found her father, dead. He had been working on the light. He never knew what hit him. She went out onto the ledge. Even from far away, she could see the sneering face of Gloria Sheffield. And she heard the voice inside her head. You do know that this is your fault, right? You never took care of those dogs and hated the cat. They're gone. You always tried to scare your little sister and told her lies. She's gone. You never did obey your parents. You took advantage of them. You tricked them to get what you wanted. They're dead now. I see a connection. You need to be punished for all of this. Everyone who deserves punishment needs to be punished. You will take the blame for this, right? You will allow yourself to be punished, right? Right? No! Angie shouted. I won't go crazy! I won't end up like Katrina! I won't! She slammed herself against the railing. The railing gave. Angie fell. As her body hit the grass, all went black. She didn't feel anything. Article printed in the Portland Press Herald. Gloria's Lighthouse, just off the coast, has claimed the lives of 3 people. When young Sarah Carter arrived home after a long disappearance, she and police found her mother, Linda Carter, father, Adam Carter, and sister, Angela Carter, dead. Forensics has shown that Angela probably fell from the lighthouse ledge. Mr. and Mrs. Carter's causes of death are unknown as of now. This particular scenario may seem familiar to those who lived in the Portland area 13 years ago. At the same lighthouse, young Katrina James came home to find her parents and sister, Diana, dead. Diana had also fallen, but from her balcony. Her parents' causes of death were never found. Gloria's Lighthouse, written by Ashley Bowie. Read by Ash Thurman.